So good evening, all. Welcome to our latest ASME Bite-Size session. This evening, we're delighted to be joined by Brian Wang, who is a final year MBBS PhD student at Imperial College London. Brian completed his undergraduate degree at Cambridge University and his clinical training at Imperial College London, and took 3 years out to do an integrated PhD. He's going to be telling us this evening, he's going to be discussing medical student scholars, how to get involved in research at medical school. The session will last approximately 45 minutes. And if there'll be an opportunity to ask questions at the end, Brian's going to go through his presentation first. If you do want to ask questions, if you could add them in the chat field, and please do make sure that you post them both to the panelist and the attendees so that everyone can see your comments or questions. If there are any questions that we don't have the opportunity to answer during the session, we will provide a document after the webinar with any questions that we're unable to address. And this will be on the event page on the ASME website. The chat field is available for you to contribute to the conversation. And we might invite some participants to expand on their comments by asking their permission to make their audio and video live. So if we message you about this, we'll ask you before we do that. Please respond via the chat feed if you're happy to do that, and then we can add you as a temporary panelist to join the discussion and expand upon your comments. Just to let you know that this webinar is being recorded, and a video of the webinar will be made available on the ASME website, along with the Q&A and any other supporting materials. If you're having any technical problems, we'd ask that you make ASME aware by emailing events@asme.org.uk, and I'll pop that in the chat in a minute, rather than adding it to the comments field. And that way, our events coordinator, Lee, will be able to get back to you and assist with any problems. So without further ado, over to you, Brian.
Thanks, Elliot. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for taking time out to listen to my talk this evening. I'm just going to share my screen now so that everyone... okay, fab. Yeah, and if anyone has any issues viewing the slides at any point, do let me know. What I'll do is I'll have the chat up as well. And yeah, just please, if you have any questions, put them in the chat. I'll try and answer them either during the talk or at the end. Okay. So yes, as Elliot said, I'm Brian. I'm doctor with PhD, but I'm a final year medical student at the moment. And I'll just be talking about how you guys can get involved in research at medical school. I'm assuming most, if not all of you, are medical students, especially probably in early career medical students. So within the first half-ish or first 2/3 of your time at medical school. So I'll be trying to focus on how to help you guys. Okay. So in terms of the talk, over the next 40 minutes or so, I'll do the really cringy bit about me at the start. And then I'll be talking mainly about my own experiences, why I think, why you might want to get involved in research, what the pros and cons are, think about what type of research is there, top tips for getting research experience. And I'll also be giving some examples of how you can get involved in your medical school, and also how you can get involved in research and audits on a national and international level. I'm assuming a lot of you will be doing or have done an intercalated degree. And I'll be talking about how you can get the most out of your degree in terms of the output, and also how to maximize your portfolios for when you apply for foundation jobs, okay, as I am doing at the moment. All right. So yeah, so a little bit, the cringy bit, a little bit about me and why I think I have a good deal of experience in terms of research. So as Elliot mentioned, I started university, started my undergraduate studies at Cambridge. I was there for 3 years before I moved to transferred to Imperial College in 2015. I did 1 year of my clinical studies, 1 year of the 3, before I met my supervisor, my PhD supervisor, who took me on for a PhD for 3.5 years. And then I rejoined into the medical medicine course, and I'm currently in my final year, so I'm applying for my FPAS and AFP jobs at the moment. Okay. In terms of my experience in teaching medical education, I've been a supervisor for the cardiovascular BSc at Imperial. I've been a guest lecturer as well in the cardiovascular sciences course. My experiences and my contributions to medical education have given me associate fellowship to the Higher Education Academy and membership to the Academy of Medical Educators. I've also been a graduate teaching assistant at Imperial as well. So I've got quite a bit of teaching experience. And I think this is quite an important slide to show you guys about different types of research experiences. So these are my own research experiences, just to let you all give you sort of an idea of what's out there. For a large chunk of my time at university, I've been a basic scientist. So my PhD was using stem cells to look at the contribution of fibrosis and fibroblasts in heart failure. I'm now also moving towards more focus on clinical research. So I am the Imperial Lead for the Remarks Research Collaborative, and I'll be talking about Remarks a bit later on. It's a great opportunity for you guys to get involved at your university, and I'll be talking a bit more about them in a bit. I'll also be talking about Star Surge. I think a lot of you might have heard of Star Surge and the stuff that they do. So I'm the Imperial representative of Star Surge. I'm also now involved in the Pan-London Heart Attack Group. So my main area of interest is in is cardiology, interventional cardiology, and I'll work with clinicians there. A lot of you will also be involved in auditing, so helping the junior doctors and the consultants with audits. That's something that I've done at Hammersmith Hospital in the intensive care unit. I also work with the Royal Society of Medicine in terms of their core committee. We are looking for new university representatives, and there's a lot of opportunities to get involved in research. So if that's something you're interested in, then please look on the Royal Society of Medicine website. I can also provide more information on the PDFs afterwards. Like I said, I've been a supervisor. I'm also currently a reviewer in several journals and the deputy chief editor for the Journal of National Student Association of Medical Research. This is a journal that provides the opportunity for a lot of medical students to learn how to publish. So that's something if you want to get into publishing and learn how to do it, and that's something that you guys can probably have a look at after this talk. Okay. So recently I've had a lot of good output. I wrote a review from my PhD about the use of stem cells in cardiac disease modeling. I've done a viewpoint paper for Open Heart about cardiovascular disease and COVID. Took some BSc students under my wing, and we wrote a review about the prognostic value of cardiovascular biomarkers in COVID. Just last Monday, we had this published in Open Heart with the Pan-London Heart Attack Group, looking at the outcomes of STEMIs in pre-COVID versus during COVID. Okay. So I do have quite a bit of experience in terms of research. I don't want to scare anyone, because to be honest, I probably have more research experience than 99.5% of medical students. So, but if you do have any questions about any sort of aspect of research, please, please feel free to ask them in the chat function. I'll try and do my best to answer them. So yeah, so that's a lot of talking about me, and why I think I have quite a good deal of knowledge about doing research when you're at medical school. I've just put this slide up. I think so. This slide is just a really broad overview of possible research orientated pathway in your training after you finish medical school. So a lot of you will be, well, I assume almost all of you, if not all of you, will be in the stage here on the left. So at medical school, a lot of you will be doing an intercalated BSc, and some of you may also consider doing the MB PhD like myself. I'm not really going to talk too much about research in terms of the MB PhD, because I know it's not offered at a lot of universities, and it's quite a big step to take. If anyone has any questions or thinks it'll be useful in the future to do a whole talk on the MB PhD, then I'm more than happy to do it. If you just suggest it to ASME or suggest it at the end, then I'm happy to talk with the ASME team about doing a full-on talk about the MB PhD program. And a lot of you will also be graduate entry medical students, so you might have had some research experience in the past. Okay. And then this is broadly the research the pathway that a lot of you guys can take when you qualify. So obviously you can go through, you do your F1, F2 years, you have the option of doing F3, F4. Most people now do F3 year to increase their portfolio, to improve their portfolio. Parallel to this, you can also apply for academic foundation training, so the AFP, a lot of you will have heard. This I won't go into too much details about it, but it's the same as the normal foundation 1 and foundation 2 years, except the only difference is that in most cases, one of the rotations, so 4 months of your F2, will be dedicated just to research. And you have a lot of options in terms of what sort of research you want to do. It can be basic science, it can be clinical, it can there's many different options, and the options available to you are vary depending on what deanery you apply to. So I won't go into too much detail about that. Okay, and then after you've done your foundation training, you go into your clinical training, and there are parallel routes that you can take. So if you are interested in a career in academia, there's the option to do academic clinical fellowship, moving on to clinical lectureship, and then you have the option, if you like, to become a senior lecturer in the future, alongside your clinical responsibilities with the NHS. And there's also personal fellowships available as well. I won't dwell on this too much. A lot of this information, all of it will be is available online, and I think it's pretty early for a lot of you to be thinking about this, so I'm just going to leave it at that. And yeah, if you want the information, then it's all available online. Okay. So what I'm going to do really briefly is talk about the pros and cons of research. These are all my own experiences and the opinions of my peers. So in terms of the pros, if you take a look at yourself as being one small cog in a big machine and big system, research is crucial for healthcare advancements. I find it very stimulating. When people ask me of my experiences in research. So that being my BSc as well as my PhD, they were fantastic. I absolutely loved doing my PhD. It was a great opportunity to feel like, you know, I was really doing something that was different, being the first person to try something, making in my eyes, breaking discoveries. And often, I mean, of course, it's going to be fantastic working for the NHS, but I think a lot of the times some doctors feel like they're sort of lost in the system. They may, you know, feel days where they feel is that rewarding, or they feel like their contribution isn't as great, which is a shame. But yeah, on a more personal, on a more selfish point of view, it is very stimulating, and I think it's a great experience for any clinician to also do some research on the side. And of course, it helps to inform clinical practice. So if you are to do research, and obviously try to do research in the area that you're interested in, then being involved and reading up and remaining up to date with the research in your area helps you become an expert in your field, and also helps to inform your clinical practice, which of course is very, very important. And the last one there is career progression. It's very quickly becoming the case where there's a lot of specialties, especially in medicine, that to get the top jobs and top consultant jobs, you pretty much need to have a PhD. Without it being set in stone or being a rule, often the competition is so great now that you often do need a PhD. In terms of the cons, so this is one of the main cons to doing research as a clinician. So a lot of times you'll have to split your time between clinical and academic responsibilities. During my PhD, because I took the 3 years out of medical school to do the PhD, obviously I didn't really have to worry about this. Whereas I worked alongside a lot of clinical PhD researchers, and I think a lot of them would agree that it's very tough balancing the two together. So often when you're doing if you're doing a PhD, you also still have clinical responsibilities with the NHS, and rather than it being 50-50, often the case often is the case where it feels like you're doing 75-75. So it's not 2 part-time jobs, you're almost doing 2 full-time jobs. But of course it depends on what sort of area of research you're involved in, what your clinical responsibilities are as well. But this was one of the main advantages to doing a PhD and doing research early on, is that now I don't have to really worry about I don't have to worry about doing a PhD as a junior doctor. So I've got that in the bag already. Another one is competition for grants. So I was very lucky. I was very well supported by my supervisors. We had a grant ready pretty quickly, and competition for grants for MB PhD students is much lower than any clinicians that wish to do a PhD. I think what can happen is that clinicians can get sort of stuck in a cycle trying to get grants, and it often takes a long time writing grants and actually getting them approved, because it is so competitive. So that's one thing to think about. The next one is a big con, in my opinion. So output is very difficult. once you get your research and you think is ready, and you send it out, it can be very disheartening when you get rejection after rejection after rejection. Unfortunately, this is a big part of doing research. Very rarely will you have the case where you have something ready that will go straight to a top journal. Often it's the case, if not always, it's the case that there's some sort of so when the reviewers come back, there's some sort of revision that they ask for, some more experiments, and often in case you do the experiments, they might think it's not enough and then reject, and you got to reapply. So this can be a very long process. So actually getting the output often takes months. In some cases, it can take years. So this is something to think about, especially also when you're if you're doing a intercalated degree and you want to get output from that. Because this process is so long, I'll be talking about some tips about how to get output from your intercalated degree, but this is often quite frustrating for researchers. Okay. The other thing to consider is a PhD is not actually often not required for all careers. I think especially, I might be wrong, but especially for surgeons. So if you want to go into surgery, there are a lot of specialties where the top surgeons don't have PhDs. It might be that the field is changing, then PhDs become required, but I don't think I'm in the right position to say. But yeah, PhDs aren't required for all careers. Yeah. And the last kind of I've sort of alluded to throughout, it takes a lot of perseverance and resilience. You get quite thick skin. You learn to deal with rejection, and I think these are very, very important features of any good researcher. Okay. So obviously there are different types of research. There's clinical research. So if you were to do a PhD later down the line, once you become a junior doctor, then often there'll be clinical research. A lot of you will be down in the bottom left, you'll be doing like in vitro lab-based stuff during an intercalated degree. If I think it's a great opportunity to do. Obviously, if you're not interested in basic science, then that's no problem at all. But I think it's a great opportunity to sort of gain some experience in basic science when you do an intercalated degree, especially because later on down the line, it becomes much more difficult when you're actually a junior doctor to sort of go in, revise your preclinical knowledge, learn about basic science again. So that's something to consider. Even if you don't think basic science down the line, basic science isn't for you, it's often a good idea to do some sort of basic science if you can at medical school, whether that be your intercalated degree or through summer projects. Top right, yeah, and you can also do animal work as well. When I was looking for PhD projects, I had a couple of project offers where they involved a lot of animal work. I wasn't too interested in animal work because I didn't really like the idea of dealing with dead animals. But there is the possibility of doing animal work, and often it can be considered that that's closer to clinical research than basic science. Animal stuff is sort of somewhere in between. So that's something to consider as well. And then so a lot of you, if you are interested in doing an intercalated degree, you might be interested in doing like meta-analyses. If you know how to code, often that is very useful. That's something I would advise you guys to do if you have free time, is actually learn how to code, because when medical students approach possible supervisors, often if you say, oh, I know how to code, it can actually really broaden possible research ideas. So those are some of the main areas, and yeah, and there's medical education research as well, as Eliot said. So these are some top tips in terms of when you're trying to get some research experience. These are things that I found very useful when I was looking for supervisors. And also actually being a supervisor for basic science and also for some clinical research as well. These are sort of the things that I look for when students approach me. So the first one I think is very important, is to be inquisitive and ask questions that shows you have an interest in the field, and that you can sort of drive a project yourself. Okay. Often supervisor is there to sort of help guide you and help when you get stuck, but as the person on the ground doing all the work, you should be quite inquisitive and ask a lot of questions. Okay. And then I'll go across. So next to it is try lesser research first. I think this is very important to make sure you don't get too overwhelmed with something that you're not comfortable with. And often this is something that researchers will want to, or supervisors will want to see, is that you've sort of done some research in the past. And I'll talk about that later on when I'll talk about research opportunities with remarks and incision and star search. Often it's good to do some data collection, work behind the scenes, getting the data together, and so that you can add that to your CV. So the next time you go to a different supervisor, you say, look, I've been involved in research, I've been involved in publications, not at the front of the authors list, but I've been involved, and that's often much better than someone being to a supervisor saying, I've never done any research before, what have you got for me? Often that's not the best way to go about it. And then funding as well. Hopefully this is where the supervisor will be able to help a lot of the time, but obviously it depends on what research you do, but you've got to think about, consumables. Are they going to be funded? It's obviously very expensive. Also, you can think about a stipend if you want to get paid whilst you're doing research. If you're doing a summer project, often you get paid for it. And also just stuff like travel and accommodation if you are doing research during summer as well. I was very fortunate that I received funding from the British Heart Foundation for my PhD. Without that funding, it wouldn't have been possible. And funding often is the most difficult. That is the major barrier to actually getting a project going. And I think the next one's very important, is the supervisor. So of course the project you do is very important, but I think there isn't enough weight put on your actual supervisor. So there are several things you want to consider. One, if you're thinking about output, you want to have a supervisor who publishes a lot. Often that's very obviously a good indicator that your project is more likely to go somewhere and produce something. The other thing is try and have a supervisor who works with a lot of people at your stage of training. So my PhD supervisor, when I went to meet him, we have a small group. So there's Professor Terracciano at the National Heart and Lung Institute, quite a small group of about a dozen or so people. Obviously it goes up and down. But of that group, there were two other MB PhD students who were the year above me. So I thought that was a very good indicator that he's, been around students in my situation. He knows he can help me if I get stuck in the process, and Because it can often be quite daunting, joining a research group as a medical student. So having a supervisor who knows was dealt or interacted with people similar to your situation is also obviously very good. Referencing software, can't emphasize this enough. Don't it makes it such a big difference if when you're writing things up to use a referencing software. They're very easy to use, and in the long run save you a ton of time. So for example, Mendeley, EndNotes, stuff like that. I won't go into too much detail, but have some sort of referencing software that you use, so that when you are submitting things, it saves you a lot of time rather than having to manually edit everything. Okay. And think about opportunities for learning as well. A project, if you want to learn how to code, you can use a research opportunity to learn how to code. If you're honest and just say, look, I've not done coding before, but I'd like to learn coding during this research project. Is there a way I can implement it? Is there a way that you can help support me financially by so that I can attend courses for coding? That's just one example. But if you want to be involved in animal research, if you like surgery, it might be quite good to do some sort of animal work as well. And then networking. So go to events if you can, as long as it's viable. Obviously, with COVID, not so many in person, but actually in a lot of cases that makes things so much easier to do networking. Now everything is online. It's so much easier to speak to people at events, to attend these events, which often be like cheaper now or even free. So if you're interested in, so say you're interested in cardiology, then go to listen to speakers and get your name out there. Be inquisitive. This goes back to the asking questions thing. Be inquisitive at these networking events. Ask them, is there an opportunity for me to talk to you about your work? Okay, people love that. No one's going to say no to talking about themselves for half an hour or whatever. So do get yourself out there and start networking as early as you can. And be open-minded as well. Understand that you might not get the perfect project or like the project that you really want. And it's okay sometimes to actually just take those, and then, because even if you were to get on paper that your perfect project, I can tell you from experience, often it very rarely goes exactly to plan. Often projects can go down a completely different route, and a lot of times it's out of your control. Other times it can be your own decision to have moved it down another route, but be open-minded, and so be adaptable to change. Okay. So I'm just going to talk about some examples about how you can get involved in your medical school. So obviously your medical schools vary in terms of their opportunities that they have. Some of you will have research societies at your medical school. This is something that I'm involved in, which is Remarks. This is a little bit of a plug, I will admit. So Remarks is a online research networking collaborative. What people use this, so if you just search on remarks.com, Remarks with an X, because it's cool. They on this platform, there's an opportunity to find research projects. So at a lot of universities, not every university has Remarks set up, but at a lot of universities, there are people who contact clinicians, researchers, and ask them to upload any projects that they have. These can be audits. These can be organizing data from NHS data. but have a look on there. If you know the specialty that you're interested in, you can search by specialty. The advantage of this is that you don't just have to do opportunities at your university. So if there are projects there that can be done remotely, or most of these will have to be remote now, then this opportunity for you to gain research experience at another institute. Which is a great opportunity. And yeah, just at the bottom, if your university isn't listed as a collaborating university, at that link there, and you want to actually be the founder of your university notice board, there's a contact mobile there for Lakshya. That's his WhatsApp. He helps set up these collaboratives at different universities. So this is a great opportunity. Just go online, have a look. If there aren't any projects on there at the moment that you're interested in, come back after a couple of days, a couple of weeks, and just check up, because projects will be going on there all the time. Okay. And then these are just some examples of national research opportunities. So hopefully a lot of you would have heard of Star Surge. Many of you would have heard of Incision as well. Both of these societies work on doing national and international audits, surgery-based audits. This is a very, very good opportunity to get your sort of foot in the door in terms of research. So you can, for Star Surge, you get added in as a data collector, so a collaborator, and then through that experience, putting that on your CV, you can then become a regional lead and then work to the steering committee. So this goes back to doing the small bits of research first, increasing your portfolio, and then moving on to bigger and bigger things there. Okay, so I'm just gonna move a little bit quicker now. In terms of making the most out of your intercalated degree, there are posters and oral presentations. These are very important, great for points when you're doing your FPAS application. Think about awards. So prizes are big money, and travel grants also count as awards as well when you're doing your applications. In terms of publications, here are some things that you should think about. I think a lot of people don't know the difference between, don't know that you actually have to pay an article processing charge if you're trying to publish in a open access journal. I won't go into the details about it now, but if you just have a look up afterwards about the difference between open access and subscription only journals. Subscription only journals, you don't have to pay as the publisher, as the author, you don't have to pay to get it published, but in open access, you have to pay for the whole processing charge, and that can actually come up to, you can be a couple of £1,000s. So if you haven't got the funding available, that's something to consider when the open access journals are for you. Okay, the Royal Society of Medicine, as I said, I'm involved with them. There's a lot of great opportunities to win prizes and to present as well. It's much easier than you think to actually win an award with the Royal Society of Medicine. So have a look on the website there. Wellcome Trust to provide a lot of grant opportunities as well, and so do the Physiological Society. So I'm the Imperial College representative for the Physiological Society, and they have been fantastic for me. They've funded a lot of my travel grants, provided a lot of travel grants for me to present all over the world, and they're very generous. But you need to subscribe to them early on. You need to be there for 12 months, but I think it's worth it. Okay, so those are just some examples there. Sorry, I'm zooming through it quite quickly, but so I'm just going to close up now with just some information about just an overview about where I've started and where I am now. So this was the first time I actually presented any research, and this was my bachelor's Bachelor's of Arts, my research for my from a time at Cambridge. I presented this at the Royal Society of Medicine. I was so scared, but it was really great actually presenting this research, and it was a real buzz. So if you haven't presented before and you worry about it, I'd really suggest you just go out there and do it. It's great to hear what people have to say about your research, and also really nice when someone cares about what you've done. And then from there, during the PhD, the main thing I'll take away from my research time, and all my time doing research, is the opportunities it provides to share my research around the world. So this was with some members of my PhD group when we went to the American Heart Association scientific session in LA. I think it was 2017. It was great. Obviously, like I said, it's all funded through research grants. So that was fantastic. I've also been able to go to Germany. So the only time I ever leave the UK is for is to present in research grant, to present at conferences. And again, this was all paid for, which was fantastic. I've been to Nice. This was when I was in LA. Moments before I bumped into Kevin Bacon. That was a real highlight of mine. And this was just last year, June last year, when I presented at the International Society of Heart Research in China. You're allowed to stay a little bit longer after your conference or whatever you're presenting at. And this was me with my cousin there and some of the other researchers on the Great Wall of China. And these are the things, the opportunities that actually doing research provides. So if anyone was to ask me, I'll definitely say give it a go. Yeah. And so I'm really, really quickly so it's just mentioned, as you guys, a lot of you will know, research isn't the only part of your portfolio. People also be looking for you to show that you've been able to work in a team, that you've shown leadership, and try to take up any teaching opportunities that you can at medical school, because you can learn a lot from it, and it looks great on your portfolio. Okay. And this is just a little quote from Alice in Wonderland that I really liked, and this is how I feel about research. And yeah, this is my final slide. So this just quick thank you to the societies that have helped me to get to where I am at the moment. Yeah, so that is everything from me. Thank you for listening. Do we have any questions? Sorry, I overran a little bit there.
Thanks, Brian. That was great. So yeah, I think we can spend a few minutes for questions if people are interested in. I know we're meant to be finishing up shortly, but we can go on for a few more minutes with some questions. I think there's a few in the chat already, so I'll just highlight a couple that have come up. So Zaina Alul has asked, how do you get in lesser research? How do you get involved in lesser research? And I guess just to expand on that from my perspective, it would be useful if you were able to define what you mean by lesser research.
Yeah, so I think in terms of lesser research, what I mean is that often it's good to, obviously the aim is to have your name as first author on this Nature paper, which would be fantastic. But often it's the case that you have to do other things like take up any audit opportunities you get offered when you're in clinical rotations. Also, like I was saying about Star Surge and Incision, being involved in those as a collaborator. So that means doesn't mean that you're an author, but it can appear on you can add it to your like Google Scholar account. You've been involved in that research, but not as an author. But that's often a good way of 1 year you're a data collector or collaborator, the next year you're the regional head, and then you just get used to the process. You learn about research, learn about publication, learn the pitfalls and what works well for you, and then that's how you build it up. It's very difficult to stumble across a supervisor who will give you a fantastic project on first time of asking.
Okay, we got a question from Ramya Rathan, who's asked if you're aware of any funding agencies for small projects that you might be able to suggest.
Yeah, so I put like the Wellcome Trust there, Physiological Society. A lot of medical schools will also have some sort of funding available for projects that you're interested in. If you just talk to your the fellow, perhaps the teaching fellows at your university. Also, if you're interested, if you know the field that you're interested in, and you can, if you just Google, say cardiology, if say you are interested in cardiology, if you just to Google cardiology research grant, undergraduate, and often some things will pop up. There's often with the big societies, there's often some pot of funding on the side, because everyone's very a lot of these societies would love to encourage. There's a big push to get people into research very earlier on in their career. So I think just have a quick Google. There's no absolute list. I get asked this quite a lot, but there's no list of research funding agencies that are available. It's also harder now because a lot of them aren't doing it because of COVID. Because as you know, a lot of conferences won't be taking place. So it takes a bit of digging.
Okay, and also just to highlight there for any participants that are interested in medical education research, obviously ASME has funding available. There's loads of different awards and research grants available, and you can see all of them on the website. So another question from Rohan Mehra is, do you have any advice for integrating students on how to get their projects published?
Yeah, so unfortunately, a lot of this, a lot of this isn't down to you as a student. What happens often with an integrated degree is that you are working under a PhD student or a postdoc. So a lot of it depends on what sort of direction they go down with the project. It can take years for them to have a full project put together, and it might be the case that the work that you're doing during the BSc takes months, years before it becomes a full paper. But when you're doing the BSc, what I'll also suggest is use that opportunity to learn about other researchers in that group, people that they're collaborating with, get to know what they're doing, and seeing if you can also help them out, be involved in their research as well. So even though it is a bit cheeky, but if you work under a PhD student, but you're interested in research, there might be someone else in their group that wants someone who can do pipetting and stuff like that and help out analyzing data. So there's no secret formula to getting it published. It's frustrating and often it's out of your control, but the more you throw yourself into it, the more opportunities you go looking for, the more likely that things will hit. So it might be that your BSc project that you did doesn't actually even get published at the end because your supervisor just says, look, I don't want to publish this. But it might be that some others researcher that you just helped out randomly for 2 days because you asked them if there's anything you could help them with, they then get their thing published and they credit you. So that's how it can work sometimes. Unfortunately, there's no hard and fast rule about publishing.
Okay, question from Sanya Tricker. Can I get funded for any research even if I'm an international student?
As far as I'm aware, yes. If you're studying in the UK, you're a medical student here, I don't think there's any form of discrimination against where you're from. Yeah, I might be wrong there. There might be some funds that are a bit picky about that, but sorry, there's just a police car going past. But as far as I'm aware, that wouldn't be a major issue, being an international student.
Question from Ed Whitaker. Any advice on getting involved in medical education research specifically? And is it difficult to transfer skills from quantitative clinical research to more qualitative research?
Well, in terms of medical education, I don't know, Elliot, I think you're the expert on this.
Yeah, I guess I'm happy to take that one. So for getting involved in medical education research, I guess one of the best things to do would be to, if you've got a project in mind or something you're interested in, a topic you're interested in researching, would be to start by doing a bit of a literature search to see, what's been covered on this topic in the past. And then I just encourage you to get in touch with someone early and have a conversation. Researchers are usually supportive of those kind of things. So either someone in your institution who you think, that is involved in medical education research. You can look on their institutional profiles and see who's publishing stuff. Or even, if it's a particular topic that you're interested in, and they're out with your institution, it might still be that you're able to get involved in some research in some way. So there's no harm in dropping them an email. And they might be able to support you sort of remotely to do some research even at your institution. So I guess the main message I would say is just to reach out to people. More often than not, people will be supportive, and it's very rarely that they'll just sort of dismiss. And sorry, to the second part of that question, Ed, about transferring skills from quantitative clinical research to qualitative research. I guess some of the aspects of it are quite transferable. So the academic writing, critical appraisal, things like that are transferable. The actual some of the research design stuff is fairly similar. Obviously, the methods that you're using are different, but it's really useful, particularly in the earlier stages of your career, to just dabble with a few different things and see what you seem to get on with and what you enjoy doing. Do you have anything to add on that, Brian?
No, I agree with that. I agree with both your points. I think the medical education research, I think, as you're saying, just go out there, ask. I think everyone here is in a great position as a medical student. You're sort of you have that experience. You know what can work well, what is missing in your curriculum. I know a lot of people at Imperial have asked about actually getting involved with helping shape the curriculum, adding teaching. Someone just asked at Imperial, can we do a teaching course where we teach medical students how to teach? And that's a great opportunity. So yeah, I agree with you, Elliot. Just ask, be inquisitive, ask if there's any opportunities out there. And your medical school, I would like to think, would be more than happy to have any students involved.
Brilliant. So I can't see any more questions, but just towards the end, I was rushing Brian a little bit. So I just want to highlight his last slide and reinforce that message about, it's not all about the research. Developing an academic career is about a mix of research, leadership, and education. And you'll see that on the Academic Foundation Programme applications, Academic Clinical Fellowship, and, throughout your career. So, do try and tend to all of those. Okay, so if there's no further questions, I think we'll close the session. Thank you all for joining, and thank you very much, Brian, for your talk.
No, thank you, Ed. Thank you everyone for attending and for your questions.